In the middle of a crowded restaurant, the manager's hand suddenly clamped around Amara's arm. Not quietly, not by accident. He pulled her toward the back hallway where no one ever lingered for long. A few customers looked up, then chose their plates instead. "This isn't a discussion," he muttered, tightening his grip. Amara resisted, her voice steady but shaken. "You can't do this." To him, she was just another black waitress who would be silenced. What he didn't realize was that someone else was already standing up, and that single mistake was about to cost him everything. Comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And subscribe for more powerful stories that demand to be heard. 2 hours earlier, the restaurant looked exactly the way it was designed to look: calm, polished, untouchable. Soft lighting reflected off white tablecloths, crystal glasses chimed gently, and quiet confidence filled the room. This place sold perfection, and most nights it convinced everyone it delivered it. Amara had already worked a double shift. Her feet ached, her shoulders carried a familiar weight, but she moved with practiced grace. Bills didn't wait, and neither did responsibility. Every guest still received the same steady welcome, the same controlled professionalism. She had learned long ago that in places like this, dignity wasn't given. It had to be carried. There weren't many black staff members here. Amara was constantly aware of that. Not because anyone announced it, but because of the way eyes lingered just a second too long. Because of how mistakes were forgiven quickly for some and remembered forever for others. Mr. Bradley, the manager, never let her forget where she stood. His criticism came wrapped in policy and tone, never loud enough to challenge, never soft enough to ignore. To him, Amara Cole wasn't an employee. She was a variable to be controlled. In the middle of the rush, Jasmine leaned in close, her voice low. "Table 4 again," she said. Amara nodded. They didn't need more words. Jasmine Reed had learned the same survival language: say less, endure more. At the table sat a white customer surrounded by colleagues, confidence spilling as easily as the drinks in front of him. When Amara approached, his smile didn't reach his eyes. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You should smile more," he said. "People like you look angry when you don't." Amara paused, then straightened. "I'll check on your order," she replied evenly, already stepping away. She didn't react, but she didn't disappear either. Moments later, a glass shattered behind her. Liquid spread across the floor. "She did that," the man said loudly. Silence followed, and then footsteps. Mr. Bradley appeared without asking questions, without hesitation. He took in the scene quickly. The wet floor, the irritated customer, the black waitress standing alone. That was all he needed. He didn't see context. He saw hierarchy. And in that moment, he chose a side. Across the room, seated quietly and unnoticed, a man watched everything with disciplined stillness. General David Cole didn't move, not yet. He had learned patience the hard way. What none of them understood was that the balance inside this room had already begun to shift. And once it did, it wouldn't shift back quietly. The moment the glass shattered, something changed in the room. Not loudly, not dramatically. It shifted in the way tension does when people sense a problem but decide it isn't theirs to solve. Conversation softened. Eyes flickered. Then silence filled the space where fairness should have been. Amara stood still as liquid soaked into the carpet near her shoes. She didn't rush to explain. She had learned that explanations in places like this were often treated as admissions of guilt. Across from her, the customer leaned back, arms crossed, watching with calm confidence. He wasn't worried. He knew how this would go. Mr. Bradley stepped in quickly, his expression already hardened. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't look at the table closely. His attention went straight to Amara, sharp and dismissive. "Clean this up," he said, his voice cutting through the room. "And try not to be so careless." Amara opened her mouth, then stopped. Every instinct told her to speak, to correct the lie forming in front of dozens of witnesses. But she felt the familiar calculation settle in. How much would it cost her to push back? She lowered her eyes briefly and knelt to wipe the floor, humiliation spreading with every second she stayed there. Nearby, Jasmine hovered, frozen between fear and anger. She wanted to step in. She wanted to say what she had seen. But she also knew what happened to people who did. Jasmine Reed had watched coworkers disappear from schedules for less. So she stayed quiet, hating herself for it. The rest of the shift followed a pattern Amara knew too well. The manager assigned her the most difficult tables. Small mistakes were magnified. Every movement was monitored. When a white waitress dropped a tray later that night, Mr. Bradley waved it off with a laugh. When Amara paused for a breath, he appeared instantly. "You're slowing things down," he said under his breath. "If this job is too much, say it." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Power didn't rely on volume. It relied on certainty. Amara pushed through, steady on the surface, unraveling underneath. She felt eyes on her constantly, not concern assessment, as if people were deciding how much she deserved what was happening. Most chose comfort over conscience. In the back, Ms. Royal. Carter watched the room from a distance. The owner had always believed the restaurant ran on professionalism and standards. She saw raised voices as stress, not bias. Control, not cruelty. When she noticed Amara cleaning the floor, she made a note to check the schedule later. Then she turned away. As the night wore on, the crowd thinned. The music softened. Shadows stretched longer across the dining room. Closing tasks began, pushing staff toward quieter corners of the building. Amara gathered receipts, her hands trembling slightly despite her effort to stay calm. She sensed movement behind her more than once, footsteps that slowed when she turned. Mr. Bradley had grown bolder as the room emptied. Without witnesses, his posture changed. He stood closer. His voice dropped lower. "Next time, think before you embarrass us," he said. "I won't cover for you again." Amara straightened. "I didn't." "Enough," he cut in. "I'm not asking. It wasn't just about the glass anymore. It never had been. It was about control, about reminding her where she stood and how easily he could erase her from this place." She moved toward the back hallway to finish her tasks. The narrow stretch of corridor the cameras never quite reached. The air felt colder there, quieter. Her steps echoed too loudly for comfort. Behind her, footsteps followed, measured, unhurried. Amara felt it before she saw him. The shift in space. The absence of safety. When she turned, Mr. Bradley was already too close. His expression was calm, almost satisfied. "We need to talk," he said. "Now." She stepped back instinctively. "This can wait." He reached out. The grip was sudden, firm, public enough to assert dominance, private enough to deny intent. His fingers tightened around her arm, steering her toward the bathroom corridor. Across the restaurant, a chair moved. Until that moment, General David Cole had remained still, blending into the background like any other quiet diner. He had watched every interaction, counted every pause, measured every look. When he rose now, it wasn't rushed. It was deliberate. Amara didn't see him stand. She only felt the pressure increase, the hallway narrowing, the world shrinking to the space between her and the man who believed he owned it. And as the last few customers turned away, choosing comfort once again, the situation crossed a line that could no longer be hidden. The hallway waited, empty, unwatched, and dangerous. And what happened next would force everyone in that building to confront exactly how far power had been allowed to go. The hallway felt narrower than it should have been. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a cold glare on painted walls that had never been meant to witness anything like this. Amara's back brushed the surface as she tried to pull away, her breath tightening with every step forced forward. The manager's grip was firm now, confident, practiced, unafraid. This was a space without cameras, without witnesses, without consequence. At least, that's what he believed. "This ends now," he said quietly, the certainty in his voice sharper than any threat. Amara steadied herself, refusing to shrink. "Take your hand off me." The words didn't come out loud, but they carried weight. Enough to irritate him, enough to challenge his authority. He leaned closer, lowering his voice further. "You don't get to make demands here." That was the moment his confidence cracked, not outwardly, but in timing. Because behind him, the hallway door opened. Footsteps entered the space with calm precision. No rush, no panic, just presence. General David Cole stopped a few feet away and took in the scene with disciplined focus. The angle of the arm, the pressure of the grip, the distance to the exit. He had seen far worse and far more dangerous places, and he recognized abuse of power instantly. He spoke once, evenly. "Let her go." The manager turned, annoyed more than alarmed. "This is a staff issue," he said. "You can wait outside." David stepped closer, eyes never leaving the hand still gripping Amara's arm. "Now." The manager scoffed, forcing a smile. "You people love playing victim." That was when David reached into his jacket and removed his identification, holding it at eye level just long enough for it to register. The hallway seemed to exhale. The color drained from the manager's face. "I am a 4-star general," David said calmly. "And what you're doing right now is assault." The hand released instantly. The shift was immediate and unmistakable. The man who had moved with unchecked authority moments earlier now stepped back, stammering, recalculating. His voice lost its edge. His posture collapsed inward. He glanced toward the dining room, suddenly aware of doors, of distance, of exposure. David didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "There are cameras outside this corridor," he continued, "and witnesses who saw you drag my wife here." Amara felt it then, the fear dissolving into clarity. This wasn't just intervention. This was accountability. The manager tried to laugh it off. "This is being blown out of proportion." David didn't respond to him. He turned to Amara instead. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head once, but he grabbed me. That was enough. They walked back into the dining room together. Conversations died instantly. Chairs scraped softly as people shifted, sensing that something irreversible had followed them out of the hallway. Phones lifted, eyes locked in place. Carter stood near the bar, confusion etched across her face as David stopped in front of her. "My wife was just physically restrained by your manager," he said, "in an area without cameras. During business hours." The room froze. The manager began to speak, words tumbling over each other. "This isn't..." "She's exaggerating," David cut him off. "There is footage, and there are witnesses." Silence pressed in, the kind that forces truth to surface. Miss Carter looked at Amara, then at the manager, then back again. Her expression hardened as reality settled in. "Give me your keys," she said quietly. The man hesitated. For the first time all night, he hesitated. "Now," she repeated. As the keys hit her palm, a murmur rippled through the room. The hierarchy had collapsed in full view. The confidence that once protected him was gone, replaced by fear and disbelief. David leaned in one final time, his voice low but absolute. "This doesn't end here." Amara stood taller than she had all night. The humiliation was gone. In its place was something heavier and far more dangerous to the systems that had failed her. And as the last customer raised their phone to record, it became clear that the consequences about to follow would reach far beyond this restaurant's walls. The consequences came quickly, and this time, they didn't fade into silence. Within days, the restaurant launched a formal investigation. Camera footage from outside the hallway confirmed what witnesses had already described. Statements were collected. Patterns emerged. What had been dismissed for years as misunderstandings and stressful management was finally named for what it was. Mr. Bradley's authority collapsed under the weight of his own actions. He was terminated, effective immediately, and barred from returning to the property. The system that had protected him no longer stood. Miss Carter addressed the staff publicly. The tone was different now, measured, restrained, unmistakably shaken. Policies were revised. Mandatory reporting channels were introduced. Training sessions followed. None of it erased what had happened, but it acknowledged what had been ignored. For the first time, the burden of discomfort shifted away from the people who had been forced to carry it. Amara received more than an apology. Her account was validated in writing. She was offered a new role, one that removed her from the environment that had enabled the abuse. More importantly, she was given the choice. The power to decide her next step belonged to her alone. When the noise settled, she and David sat together in quiet reflection. No uniforms, no titles, just the weight of the truth between them. "I shouldn't have needed this," she said softly. "You shouldn't have," David Cole replied. "But you were never wrong." Amara understood something then that would stay with her long after this night faded. Her dignity had never been conditional. The injustice she faced wasn't rare. It was routine. And the difference this time wasn't luck. It was exposure. Stories like hers unfold every day in places that look harmless, polished, respectable. In offices, in restaurants, in institutions that rely on silence to survive. Racism doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits in hallways without cameras, confident no one will question its reach. This wasn't just the end of one man's power. It was a reminder of how easily power abuses flourish when no one is watching, and how quickly they unravel when someone finally does. The real question is not whether justice came this time. It's how many stories never reach this point at all. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Black Community Struggles for more powerful stories about justice, truth, and our community's fight to be seen. And don't forget to hit the like button. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.